Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Chloe Davis here, and today I'm sharing a story that completely flipped my world upside down. It all started with an abandoned $900 house and a whole lot of family drama. If you've ever felt misunderstood by your family or had to fight for your dreams, you're in the right place. Stick around because I'm about to show you how betrayal led to the best decision of my life. I'm Chloe Davis, 27 years old, and I never thought my life would change because of a $900 abandoned house. After saving every penny for years while living with my parents, I finally found it. A forgotten property with broken windows and sagging floors, but all I saw was potential. When I told my family about my purchase, instead of funding my sister Brooke's $4,000 spiritual retreat, my mother Eleanor's face hardened. "Then live like junk," she spat, as they packed my belongings. That night, standing alone in my empty, freezing house, I wondered if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. If you've ever had your family misunderstand your dreams, drop a comment below. I'm reading your stories while sanding these floors. And if you're joining me for the first time, welcome. Let me show you how I turned betrayal into the best decision of my life. Growing up in the manicured suburbs of Maplewood, New Jersey, I learned early that appearances mattered more than authenticity in the Davis household. My mother, Eleanor, with her perfectly highlighted bob and country club membership, orchestrated our family image with the precision of a symphony conductor, while my father, Richard, a mid-level banking executive, funded her social aspirations despite his quiet reservations. Our modest two-story colonial, with its hunter green shutters and pristine lawn, became the backdrop for a childhood defined by subtle yet persistent inequality between myself and my younger sister, Brooke. From the beginning, Brooke embodied everything my parents valued. She was naturally graceful, socially adept, and effortlessly charming at family gatherings where I would retreat to corners with books. While Brooke received professional figure skating lessons, designer clothes, and eventually a car for her 16th birthday, I was reminded that practical girls make their own opportunities. So, I did exactly that, working at the local grocery store since age 16, tucking away every spare dollar into a savings account my parents didn't know existed. When Brooke decided on a last-minute spring break trip her senior year, my parents casually asked me to help out with her expenses. Despite my own plans to take community college classes that summer, this pattern continued through our 20s. Brooke flitted between expensive hobbies and finding herself endeavors. While I completed my accounting degree at night school, eventually securing a respectable position at a local firm. Even at 27, I still lived at home. Partly due to the astronomical housing market, but also because of the subtle guilt trips whenever I mentioned moving out. "Family supports family, Chloe," my mother would say, which really meant financial support flowed one way in our household. When I received my promotion to senior accountant last month, the small salary bump felt like a lifeline. A chance to finally breathe beyond the suffocating expectation that I would forever be the family safety net. I celebrated quietly by downloading home renovation videos and dreaming of spaces where no one would comment on my sensible clothes or suggest I donate to Brooke's latest passion project. The irony wasn't lost on me that while my family praised independence as a virtue, they seemed determined to prevent me from actually achieving it. The day I found the house started with a traffic detour that forced me down Willow Creek Lane, a street I'd never had reason to drive before. Sandwiched between better-maintained properties sat a small Victorian with fading blue paint and a yard overtaken by nature. I actually drove past it before something made me circle back and park across the street. The for sale sign was so weathered I could barely make out the phone number. But something about the way the morning light caught the beveled glass of a partially intact window spoke to something deep inside me. From the street, I could see the sagging porch, missing roof shingles and boarded-up lower windows. But I also noticed the intricate woodwork underneath years of neglect, and the solid brick foundation that had stood the test of time. That evening, I called the number and learned from a surprised-sounding real estate agent that the property had been abandoned for 15 years. After the elderly owner passed away with no heirs, the county had seized it for back taxes, and it was headed for auction with a starting bid of just $900. "It's practically condemned," the agent warned. "Most buyers are just interested in the land." But I couldn't shake the feeling that this forgotten house was meant for me. The next day, I called in sick to work and brought my friend Ethan, who worked in construction, to peek through the windows. "Structurally, the bones look decent," he admitted, tapping the century-old timber frame. "But you're looking at new electric, plumbing, windows, roof, basically everything else." I nodded, already running mental calculations based on my savings and the renovation videos I'd been studying for months. Over the next 2 weeks, I returned to the property 6 times. Once jimmying open a back door to explore the dust-covered interior with its peeling wallpaper and water-stained ceilings. Despite the decay, I discovered hard pine floors underneath the rotting carpet, built-in cabinets with glass doorknobs, and a cast-iron clawfoot tub buried under debris in the bathroom. During one visit, I met Mr. Peterson, an elderly neighbor who remembered the house in its prime. "That was the Murphy place," he told me, eyes crinkling with memories. "Margaret Murphy made the best apple pies in the county and hosted caroling parties every Christmas. Shame to see it fall apart after she passed." His stories only deepened my connection to the property, helping me envision what it could be again with enough care and work. I spent nights researching DIY renovation techniques, sustainable building materials, and city permit requirements, creating detailed spreadsheets of projected costs that I could manage on my salary if I was careful. Something about this forgotten house reflected how I sometimes felt in my own family, full of potential that no one else seemed to notice. 2 days before the auction, I withdrew $1,000 from my secret savings account, telling no one in my family about my plan, already anticipating their reaction to what they would surely see as a foolish, impractical dream. The county auction was held in a fluorescent-lit basement room of the municipal building where I sat nervously clutching my cashier's check among a handful of property developers in expensive suits. When the auctioneer called lot number 47, describing it as the property at 156 Willow Creek Lane being sold as is, I felt my heart hammering in my chest. The starting bid was $900, and I immediately raised my number, surprised when no one else bid against me. Going once, going twice. "Sold to bidder number 18, the auctioneer announced, already moving to the next property. As I sat in stunned silence, a bored county clerk helped me complete the paperwork, explaining about quick claim deeds and my responsibility for any liens against the property. "Congratulations, you now own a money pit," she said without humor. But I couldn't stop smiling as I clutched the deed with my name on it, Chloe Davis, homeowner. The giddy feeling of accomplishment carried me through the day at work and all the way home, where I found my family gathered in the living room, Brooke's eyes puffy from what looked like happy tears. "Perfect timing," my mother said, patting the space beside her on the sofa. "Brooke has the most wonderful news." My sister straightened up, her voice breathless with excitement as she described an exclusive spiritual wellness retreat at Aspen Grove Retreat, Colorado. 2 weeks of guided meditation, energy healing, organic meals, and transformative experiences with a guru who rarely accepted new clients. "It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity," she gushed, "but I need to submit the full payment by Friday to secure my spot." My father sat quietly, examining his fingernails as my mother squeezed Brooke's hand. "We thought since you just got that nice promotion, you might want to give your sister this special gift," my mother said, her tone making it clear this wasn't really a request. "The retreat costs $4,000, which seems like a lot, but you can't put a price on spiritual growth." The room fell silent as they waited for my automatic agreement. the same pattern we'd followed for years. But something had changed in me that day. "Actually," I said, my voice surprisingly steady, "I just spent my savings on a house." The confusion on their faces might have been comical in another context. "What do you mean, a house?" my father finally asked. I explained about 156 Willow Creek Lane, trying to convey my excitement about its potential, the history, the beautiful details waiting to be restored. With each word, my mother's expression hardened while my father's eyebrows climbed higher. "You bought a condemned property?" my mother interrupted, her voice rising. "For what possible reason?" When I mentioned the $900 price, Brooke gave a short, incredulous laugh. "You could have just given me that money plus what you're going to waste on renovations," she said. At least my retreat would actually benefit someone. The conversation quickly spiraled as my mother paced the living room, calling my decision impulsive, irresponsible, and selfish. My father shook his head, repeating, "I thought we raised you better than this, Chloe." When I tried explaining the financial logic, how property ownership would secure my future, my mother cut me off. "If you prefer living in garbage to helping family, then live like junk," she snapped. "You've never supported this family properly, and now you're actively trying to embarrass us." Brooke dramatically called our aunt during the argument, sobbing into the phone about missing her spiritual opportunity, ensuring the news would spread through our extended family by morning. By midnight, the situation had deteriorated to my mother declaring, "If that broken-down shack means more to you than your sister's well-being, maybe that's where you should live instead of under our roof." Standing in the hallway with my father's disappointed gaze boring into my back, I realized with startling clarity that nothing I did would ever be enough unless it aligned perfectly with their vision for our family narrative. The 3 days following our confrontation unfolded in a psychological warfare of silent treatments punctuated by barbed comments over meals. My mother performed her disappointment like a tragic stage actress, sighing heavily whenever I entered a room and answering my questions with clipped one-word responses. My father retreated into passive disapproval, burying himself in newspaper pages that rustled accusingly whenever I walked past. Brooke alternated between tearful phone calls with friends about her stolen opportunity and leaving spiritual wellness articles outside my bedroom door with passages like, "Generosity enlarges the soul," highlighted in neon yellow. The tension climaxed when my cousin Paige called to suggest I make peace by doing the right thing, confirming that my parents had successfully enlisted the extended family in their pressure campaign. The unspoken expectation hung in the air like a storm cloud. Sell the house, fund the retreat, resume my designated role as family financial backup. Wednesday evening, I returned from work to find my mother had rearranged the living room, removing family photos that included me and prominently displaying Brooke's childhood dance trophies. This childish gesture somehow broke something loose inside me, and I calmly announced at dinner that I would begin moving my things to my house that weekend. My mother's fork clattered against her plate. "So you're choosing a pile of rotting wood over your family?" she demanded. My careful explanation that I wasn't choosing between them only enraged her further as she listed every sacrifice she'd ever made for me, culminating in, "We gave you a roof over your head all these years, and this is how you repay us." When my father finally spoke, his quiet, "Your mother and I are disappointed in your priorities, Chloe," somehow hurt worse than my mother's shouting. The argument erupted into a full-blown family meltdown when Brooke tearfully announced she'd already told her spiritual guide she was coming, having assumed I would do the right thing. My mother's ultimatum came like a thunderclap. "Either sell that monstrosity and help your sister, or pack your things tonight." The sudden shock of realizing I'd never actually believed they would go this far froze me momentarily before I walked upstairs without another word. and began pulling suitcases from my closet. Neither of my parents offered to help as I made trip after trip to my 10-year-old sedan, stuffing it with clothes, a laptop, and essential toiletries. Family photographs, childhood mementos, and books had to be abandoned as there simply wasn't room, and no one offered to store anything for me. My mother watched from the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, occasionally commenting on items I should leave behind since they were family property. Brooke remained in her room with the door closed, but I could hear her dramatic sniffling through the thin walls. By 11 that night, my car was packed to the ceiling, and I stood in my childhood bedroom for the last time, now stripped bare, except for the furniture. My father appeared briefly to hand me a flashlight, saying stiffly, "You'll need this since that place probably doesn't have electricity." The closest thing to concern anyone had shown. The 20-minute drive to Willow Creek Lane passed in a blur of streetlights and shock, reality only truly hitting when I pulled up to the dark silhouette of my new home. The house loomed ominously in the darkness, windows like black eyes witnessing my arrival. Using my father's flashlight, I navigated through the front door that hung slightly crooked on its hinges. The beam illuminating dust motes swirling in the stale air. I laid out a sleeping bag on the least damaged section of floor in what would eventually become the living room, surrounded by hastily packed boxes and the distant sounds of the house settling that first night. Curled in my sleeping bag as the April air seeped through broken windows, I alternated between tears and a strange detached numbness, wondering if I'd made a catastrophic mistake that would ruin my life completely. The harsh morning light streaming through broken windows illuminated the full reality of my situation. I owned a house but had no running water, no electricity, and no heating beyond a small camping stove I'd impulsively purchased at an all-night supermarket on my way over. My first attempt at using the bathroom ended with the horrifying discovery that the toilet didn't flush, and the pipes made alarming groaning sounds when I turned the rusted handles. Day one of homeownership began with a humbling trip to the gas station down the street to use their restroom and wash my face in the grimy sink, avoiding eye contact with the curious cashier. By day 3, I'd established a survival routine. Showering at the gym before work, using public restrooms whenever possible, charging my phone at the office, and returning to my cold, dark house each evening, where I'd work by lantern light until exhaustion overcame me. The financial reality hit like a physical blow when I contacted utility companies and received estimates for reconnection. The electrical panel needed complete replacement before they would even consider service. The water line had corroded, and the gas company required a professional inspection of all lines. The quotes I gathered totaled more than 3 times what I'd planned, depleting my remaining savings before I'd even addressed the sagging roof or broken windows. Every morning I awoke stiff and cold, forcing myself to put on a presentable work outfit from increasingly wrinkled clothes stored in my car, all while trying to maintain the appearance of normalcy to my colleagues. My body began revolting against these conditions. A persistent cough developed from the dust and mold. My back ached from sleeping on the floor, and my hands grew raw and cracked from washing clothes in cold water. The emotional toll proved even harder than the physical challenges, as my phone remained silent day after day. No calls from my parents asking if I was safe. No texts from Brooke wondering if I needed anything. Not even the usual family group chat notifications about weekend plans. Instead, I discovered through a coworker's casual comment that my sister had somehow funded her retreat anyway and had posted multiple photos with captions about pursuing spiritual growth despite family obstacles. My mother began sharing cryptic Facebook posts about ungrateful children and the importance of family loyalty, carefully crafted to elicit supportive comments from relatives without explicitly mentioning our situation. During the second week, A severe rainstorm exposed dozens of roof leaks, soaking my sleeping bag and the few possessions I'd managed to unpack. Huddled under a tarp I'd hastily nailed to the ceiling, listening to water drip into strategically placed buckets and pans, I experienced my lowest moment. "What am I doing?" I whispered into the darkness, scrolling through apartment listings on my phone with trembling fingers, calculating how quickly I could sell this disaster and find a normal place to live. That same night, attempting to plug in my camping lantern, I discovered the wiring was so degraded that sparks shot from the outlet, nearly starting a fire and sending me into a panic attack that left me gasping for breath on the front porch. Sleep-deprived and overwhelmed, I called Ethan at midnight, my voice breaking as I confessed I might have made a terrible mistake. Without hesitation, he said, "I'll bring coffee and donuts tomorrow morning and we'll make a plan." The first unconditional support I'd received since this ordeal began. The following day at work, my supervisor Sarah noticed my exhaustion and gently closed her office door to ask if everything was all right. When the whole story tumbled out, I expected judgment, but instead received unexpected compassion. "My parents didn't speak to me for 2 years when I married my husband," she shared. "Sometimes the hardest decisions are the ones that ultimately lead us where we need to be." Despite these small lifelines, doubts continued to plague me, especially at night when every creak of the settling house reminded me of all the work ahead and every silent notification on my phone emphasized my sudden isolation from the family that had, despite everything, been my constant for 27 years. Ethan arrived early Saturday morning as promised, not just with coffee and donuts, but also with basic tools, a portable work light, and his cousin Tyler, who specialized in electrical work. "Consider this a housewarming party," he joked, handing me a steaming cup as his cousin Tyler assessed the electrical panel with professional interest, rather than the horror I'd grown accustomed to seeing on people's faces. "The wiring's shot, but the panel replacement isn't as bad as they quoted you," Tyler said, scribbling figures on a notepad. "I can do it for materials, plus a couple hundred if you help." This unexpected offer brought the first real tears since I'd moved in. Tears Ethan pretended not to notice as he measured windows for temporary coverings. By Sunday evening, we had electricity in 2 rooms, plastic sheeting over the worst window gaps, and a basic understanding of which floorboards would support weight. Monday morning at work, I arrived with slightly less dishevelment and mentioned Ethan's help to my supervisor, Sarah, who immediately connected me with her brother-in-law, who worked for a plumbing supply company. "He owes me favors," she said with a wink. "Let me make a call." Word of my project spread through the office like wildfire, but instead of the ridicule I expected, coworkers began offering surprising assistance. Jenna from accounting had leftover bathroom tiles from her renovation. Mark, in client services, owned a pressure washer I could borrow. Ashley knew someone selling a gently used refrigerator. The unexpected outpouring left me speechless and shifted something fundamental in how I viewed my challenge. The neighborhood initially regarded me with suspicious glances and whispers, particularly when I dragged rotting materials to the curb or made noise at odd hours. Mrs. Albright from next door actually called the police my first weekend, convinced I was a squatter. But the embarrassing episode ended with Officer Rodriguez examining my deed and then offering advice about city permits. "My wife and I fixed up our first place too," he shared, writing down the name of a reputable roofing company that worked with limited budgets. The ice truly broke when I helped Mr. Peterson across the street retrieve his escaped cat from a tree, leading to an invitation for Sunday dinner, where I met several neighbors, including Mike Davis, who owned the local hardware store. "Margaret Murphy would be happy someone's saving her house," he said, studying me with kind eyes before offering store credit until my next payday, when I mentioned needing supplies for a leaking pipe. Mike's store became my second home as I navigated the mysteries of home repair. his patient explanations and hand-drawn diagrams, guiding me through projects I'd previously only watched on videos. The employees eventually recognized me on site, offering tips and occasionally slipping extra materials into my purchases with conspiratorial winks. An unexpected connection formed with 90-year-old Eleanor Hayes from 2 doors down, who appeared one evening with a thermos of homemade soup and memories of the house from 60 years earlier. There used to be a beautiful trellis of roses along that south wall, she told me, her weathered hands gesturing toward the barren side of the house. Our impromptu history lesson became a regular Tuesday ritual, with Eleanor sharing neighborhood stories while I worked, occasionally passing me tools or holding my flashlight. She never mentioned my family situation directly, but once said while watching me patch a wall, "Houses, dear. Sometimes the ones we build ourselves are stronger than the ones we are born into." My online presence in DIY renovation forums brought virtual support from strangers who cheered my progress photos and offered solutions to unusual problems. When I posted about the challenging ceiling leak in the back bedroom, a retired contractor from Arizona talked me through a temporary fix at midnight, then followed up the next day to make sure it had worked. The turning point in my family exile came unexpectedly when my cousin Paige appeared on my doorstep one rainy afternoon, defying the unspoken family boycott. "Mom told me not to come," she admitted, shifting awkwardly on the newly repaired porch steps. "But I wanted to see this place for myself." Her initial shock at the conditions quickly transformed into admiration as I showed her the small victories: a functioning bathroom, patched roof sections, the original hardwood floors we'd discovered under rotting carpet. Before leaving, she hugged me tightly and whispered, "You're building something amazing, both this house and yourself." The first family validation I'd received in over a month. That night, surrounded by paint samples and renovation plans, I realized I was no longer working just to prove my family wrong, but because I'd found a community that believed in my vision and in me. 3 months into my renovation journey, I celebrated a significant milestone, taking my first shower in my own functioning bathroom, complete with restored clawfoot tub, vintage-inspired fixtures, and subway tiles installed during a weekend tile party where 5 co-workers had shown up with pizza and wine to help. Standing under the hot water, watching it swirl down a drain, I had personally connected to new pipes. I experienced a profound sense of accomplishment, entirely different from any achievement my family had ever acknowledged. The house was gradually revealing its hidden character as layers of damage and neglect peeled away underneath 7 layers of wallpaper in the dining room. We discovered hand-painted wildflowers that Eleanor confirmed had been created by Margaret Murphy's artist daughter in the 1930s, a section we carefully preserved and framed with reclaimed wood. The kitchen transformation began when Ethan's contractor friend located salvaged cabinets from a mansion renovation across town. Their solid oak construction and glass-fronted doors perfectly suiting the house's vintage character, while costing a fraction of new alternatives. I learned to refinish them myself, spending weekends sanding and applying multiple coats of paint, discovering meditative peace in the repetitive motions and tangible results. My problem-solving abilities expanded exponentially as I tackled challenges my parents would have immediately outsourced. When the basement flooded after particularly heavy rain, I researched drainage solutions and installed a simple system using materials from Mike's hardware store. When birds nested in a broken attic vent, I waited for the babies to fledge before designing and building a custom replacement that preserved the architectural detail while providing better protection. Each completed project strengthened my confidence and reshaped my self-perception. From the dutiful daughter seeking approval to a capable woman creating her own destiny, the financial constraints that initially seemed crippling became a catalyst for creativity and community building. I established a barter system with neighbors, exchanging accounting help for Mr. Peterson's masonry skills when the chimney needed repair. Hunting for architectural salvage at restoration yards became weekend adventures with new friends who understood the victory dance. When finding period-appropriate door handles or vintage light fixtures at affordable prices, my professional skills improved alongside my renovation abilities as I applied the same methodical approach to challenges at work, leading to additional responsibilities and recognition from management. The physical transformation mirrored my internal evolution. Muscles developed from carrying lumber and wielding tools, replacing the soft compliance my mother had always valued with functional strength that served my goals rather than others' expectations. My wardrobe shifted from the conservative business attire my parents had deemed appropriate to practical clothes that expressed my emerging personal style. Complete with paint splatters, I viewed as badges of honor rather than flaws to be hidden. Social media became both documentation and declaration of independence as I chronicled my renovation journey, each post accumulating supportive comments and surprisingly followers interested in historic restoration and women tackling traditionally male-dominated projects. Local interest in the house grew when a small neighborhood newsletter featured the transformation of the old Murphy place, highlighting before and after photos of the restored front porch with its intricate spindlework and newly painted gingerbread trim. The attention brought unexpected visitors, including an architectural historian who identified unique features worth preserving and offered guidance on historically accurate restoration techniques. 6 months in, the house had transformed from neighborhood eyesore to emerging gem. Fresh paint in historically appropriate colors adorned the exterior. Gardens planned with Eleanor's guidance began reclaiming their overgrown yard. Windows gleamed with new glass set in restored original frames. And inside, livable spaces expanded room by room, each reflecting careful choices that honored the home's history while accommodating modern needs. My perspective on material possessions fundamentally shifted as I intentionally curated my space with items chosen for meaning rather than status. A bookshelf crafted from flooring salvaged during the renovation. Mismatched vintage dishes that delighted me more than my mother's proper matching sets. Wall art created from architectural elements too damaged to restore but too beautiful to discard. None of these changes erased the ache of family estrangement that occasionally surfaced during quiet evenings or holiday seasons. But instead of the desperate longing for reconciliation that had initially consumed me, I found myself critically evaluating what kind of relationship would be healthy if we ever reconnected. The house, once a source of family rupture, gradually became physical proof that I could create beauty and stability entirely on my own terms. A lesson no spiritual retreat could have taught so thoroughly or permanently as the transformation happening within these healing walls and within myself. On a crisp October morning, nearly 8 months after my abrupt departure from the family home, my phone lit up with a text from Brooke. Just got back from my mindfulness workshop. Mom and Dad won't stop talking about some article that mentioned your house. What's going on? The message. Our first direct communication since she'd left for her Aspen Grove retreat, Colorado, coincided with the publication of a small feature about historic home restorations in the local newspaper where 156 Willow Creek Lane had been highlighted for its remarkable community-supported transformation. My non-committal response prompted a flurry of family texts, culminating in my mother announcing they would drop by tomorrow to see this project everyone's talking about. Their impending visit sent me into a cleaning frenzy, despite Sarah's gentle reminder that you don't need to impress people who threw you out. Words that resonated but couldn't entirely dispel 30 years of seeking parental approval. When my parents' luxury SUV pulled up outside the following afternoon, I watched through newly restored front windows as they surveyed the exterior with visible surprise. My father actually circling to view the rebuilt back porch, while my mother remained frozen beside the car, her expression unreadable behind oversized sunglasses. Opening the door before they could knock felt strangely empowering, as did greeting them with confident composure, rather than the desperate relief I might have shown months earlier. My father entered first, his customary stoicism faltering as he took in the gleaming hardwood floors, restored original trim, and the living room's transformation from my first night sleeping spot to a warm, inviting space with furniture sourced from estate sales and reupholstered by hand. My mother moved through the rooms with characteristic critical attention, running her finger along surfaces, checking for dust. Though her prepared criticisms died unspoken when confronted with undeniable evidence of quality restoration. "You did all this yourself?" my father finally asked, genuine astonishment breaking through his reserve. As I showed them the kitchen with its farmhouse sink and open shelving displaying the mismatched vintage dishes my mother would never have allowed. In her coordinated home, the tense silence broke when my mother spotted a framed newspaper clipping about the house, scanning it quickly before noting with forced casualness, "The Hendersons saw this article at their country club and mentioned it to everyone at the charity's luncheon last week." The statement revealed their true motivation. The house they dismissed as junk had become a talking point among their social circle, potentially altering their narrative of having a problematic, ungrateful daughter. Our awkward tour continued with increasingly desperate attempts by my mother to reassert control. Suggestions about improvements I should make. Comments about how with proper guidance, this could be quite nice. And finally, "Your sister has been worried about you all this time." A blatant revision of history that finally prompted me to respond. "Brooke hasn't contacted me once in 8 months, I stated quietly, the simple truth landing between us like a stone. My father retreated to examine the restored fireplace mantel, while my mother's face flushed with the uncomfortable collision of her preferred family narrative and reality. The kitchen became the backdrop for the inevitable confrontation when my mother, seemingly unable to continue acknowledging my achievement, pivoted to criticism. "Well, this has been an interesting little project, but surely you see now that you could sell this place for a nice profit and come home where you belong." The word home hung in the air between us. Its meaning fundamentally changed since the night they had expelled me for prioritizing my dreams over Brooks. With unexpected clarity, I explained that I wasn't interested in selling the house or returning to my former role in the family, watching confusion cross my mother's face as she processed the realization that her power over me had diminished. My father, unusually perceptive, asked what conditions might allow for family reconciliation. A question that would have once sent me scrambling to accommodate whatever they wanted, but now prompted thoughtful consideration. "I'd like a relationship based on mutual respect," I explained carefully, "where my choices are valued, even when they differ from what you would choose." My mother's instinctive objection was interrupted by the arrival of Eleanor Hayes with a freshly baked apple pie. Her entrance perfectly timed, as if she'd been watching from her window across the street. "You must be Chloe's parents," she said with pointed warmth. "She's become quite treasured in our neighborhood." The subtle emphasis on community acceptance undermined my mother's prepared narrative about my isolation, especially when Eleanor mentioned the upcoming holiday block party being hosted in my newly restored backyard. As my parents prepared to leave an hour later, their departure highlighted our transformed dynamic. My father awkwardly mentioned getting together for dinner sometime while my mother issued a stiff invitation to Thanksgiving, adding, "If you're not too busy with your new friends," with barely concealed jealousy of the connections I'd formed, standing on my rebuilt porch, watching their car disappear down Willow Creek Lane. I recognized the significance of remaining firmly planted in my own space rather than chasing after their approval. My house standing as both physical boundary and symbol of independence that could no longer be diminished by their judgment or withdrawn at their convenience. 1 year after purchasing the junk house that catalyzed my family exile, I hosted a housewarming party that symbolized the complete transformation of both property and self. Guests flowed through rooms now fully restored with period details and modern comforts, exclaiming over the kitchen soapstone counters installed with help from 3 neighbors, the living room's working fireplace that had required Mason Mike's expertise to rebuild, and the garden Eleanor had helped design using heritage plants descended from her own century-old flower beds. The crowd represented my expanded world. Co-workers who had become friends, neighbors now considered family, skilled tradespeople who had taught me their crafts, and even a local preservation society member who had nominated the house for a restoration award. Among these celebrants moved my father, somewhat awkwardly but genuinely interested in Ethan's explanation of how we'd reinforced the sagging joists, and my cousin Paige, who brought 3 other family members curious enough to defy the lingering tension to see the finished project for themselves. My mother and Brooke had declined the invitation with transparent excuses, maintaining the fragile, limited contact established since their uncomfortable visit months earlier. The absence felt more like relief than loss, particularly when contrasted with the authentic connections surrounding me. People who valued contribution over competition and collaboration over control. The house itself had become something of a local landmark, not just for its physical transformation, but for the community effort it represented, with regular mentions in neighborhood discussions about preservation and revitalization. When the local news station featured a segment on community-based restoration projects, their 3-minute piece on 156 Willow Creek Lane highlighted not just before and after visuals, but the network of relationships that had made it possible. Connections that continued enriching the neighborhood through skill-sharing workshops I now hosted monthly in the restored carriage house. The property's value had increased exponentially with a recent appraisal, placing it at 17 times my initial investment, creating financial stability I hadn't imagined possible that first desperate night on the floor. More significantly, the skills acquired during renovation led to an unexpected career opportunity when a small historic preservation firm offered me a position managing restoration projects. Recognizing that my combination of accounting background and hands-on experience created a valuable perspective on both budgeting and execution. My relationship with my parents evolved into a careful, conscious renegotiation rather than automatic restoration. My father made individual efforts, stopping by occasionally with tools or hardware store gift cards. His silent acknowledgement of past misjudgment expressed through practical support rather than words. During one such visit, while helping install kitchen backsplash tiles, he quietly admitted, "Your mother and I were wrong about this place. You saw what we couldn't." These small moments of recognition meant more than grand apologies, especially when followed by genuine interest in my projects and plans, without attempts to redirect or control. My mother's journey toward authentic relationship proved more challenging. Her ingrained patterns of manipulation and comparison resurfacing during our limited interactions. Her attempts to take credit for my success, "You get your determination from me," or diminish my achievement. Anyone could do well with that much help, required consistent, gentle boundary enforcement. The most telling moment came during a tense family dinner when she suggested, "I should now help fund Brooke's yoga teacher training since the family supported you through your house project." The stunned silence around the table as everyone recalled the reality of my ejection, rather than their support, marked a turning point in dismantling the false narratives that had shaped our family dynamic for decades. Brooke and I established a tentative adult relationship, unburdened by the competition our parents had fostered. Beginning with her genuine apology during a private coffee meeting and continuing through occasional text exchanges that acknowledged our different paths without judgment. The sister who had once seen me primarily as a funding source slowly recognized the skills and perspective I could authentically offer, recently asking for advice about managing her perpetually chaotic finances without expecting me to solve her problems. Some extended family relationships healed completely, while others remained permanently altered, a natural consequence of standing firmly in my truth. Rather than contorting myself to maintain false harmony, the most profound transformation occurred within me, reshaping my understanding of both family and home. Where I once believed family meant unconditional sacrifice, and home represented physical shelter provided at the cost of emotional autonomy, I now recognize that true family supports growth rather than compliance. And home means creating spaces where authenticity thrives rather than suffocates. And quiet evenings sitting on my restored front porch, watching neighborhood children play under the same oak trees that had witnessed generations before them. I often reflected on the irony that being kicked out had actually set me free. The house that began as a symbol of rejection became the foundation for a life built consciously rather than inherited by default. Teaching me that sometimes what looks like breaking is actually becoming. If you've ever had to rebuild your life after family rejection, or had to choose between others' expectations and your own dreams, I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. How has a challenging decision that others criticized ultimately led you to unexpected growth? If my journey resonated with you, please like this video. Don't forget to subscribe to join our community of resilience and rebuilding, and share this with someone who might need to be reminded that sometimes what looks like an ending is actually the beginning of something beautiful. Thank you for being part of my journey. And remember, the most valuable renovations are the ones we do within ourselves.